Hi y'all, welcome back to the garden. Today we're going to be planting some shrubs and trees in the mixed border behind me. This is going to be a 9-foot border. It may expand over time of evergreens and deciduous shrubs and trees. Mostly shrubs, but I do have a tree that I'm going to be planting today for you. It's called Starway to Heaven. It is a styrex, also known as a snowbell, and it's new to the Proven Winners tree program. So Proven Winners started a tree program several years ago, and they're just releasing some new ones to market here and there. And this is one that's going to be released next year in 2025. So let's take a look at it. So the specimen that I have is pretty small. Like I said, these are new to the market and you may or may not find them in your garden centers next year. It may take a couple years as this program gets rolled out. But Starway to Heaven has beautiful glossy leaves. It is deciduous. It gets roughly 5 to 8 foot wide and 20 to 30 foot tall. And so it'll be very nice in this 9-foot deep bed here behind me. Styrexes are called snowbells because they produce these little flowers. They look like bells, kind of similar to snowdrops if you're familiar with the bulbs that you plant in fall that come up in spring. But this variety is interesting because it reblooms. It blooms in the spring and then it'll rebloom in the fall. And also, they're not just look like little ballerina skirts, they flare out to look like stars. And so when it produces all of these buds, you get these beautiful star-looking blooms all over the plant in spring and fall. Now this plant is in a special container straight from the grower I picked up at Cultivate this year, and I am going to be planting it tonight to get it in the ground and get it some water. It's been kind of stressful conditions for the past week at Cultivate, so this will be really nice for it. I've laid out, and I come through this morning and laid out a bunch of other shrubs and trees that I'm going to be planting in this border. I'll take you through and show you those right quick before we get started. So one of my purposes of doing this bed behind the fence is just some extra privacy. I'm planting some evergreens there just for privacy in winter, and then some deciduous things for privacy for the pool in summer. But also it's to allow me to take care of the fence better. If you've not considered putting mulch kind of under your fences around your home, it makes mowing the grass a whole lot simpler and you don't always have to weed eat around them. And that's one of the reasons I've done it at both my last garden and this garden. Even if you don't have plants on the other side of it and it's just a 1 to 2 foot shoot out of mulch underneath your fence, it's really helpful just for care over time. So some of these things are things I ordered from Great Garden Plants in the spring, so they've gotten pretty big. A few of them were sent out to me by Proven Winners. A couple of them I gathered from garden centers, and a couple of them were at this home when I moved in, and I dug them up and I've relocated them here behind the fence. So the first one here is this Sgt. Pepper dogwood cornice. It has beautiful variegated foliage, and it's going to go here on the end. Now, most everything I'm planting gets about 4 to 5 foot wide and up to 8 foot tall. This one gets about 5 foot tall, I think it said, and a little wider. But it's really beautiful. It's a new variety that's coming out this year that was just announced. You can order it from Great Garden Plants. And I have another one of these I'm probably going to put out front. So this one's going to go right here on the edge, and I've spaced it appropriately so that when it grows it'll have enough room and not interfere with the gate. You'll notice I have these stakes. If you use stakes, I highly recommend you space out everything with stakes. It makes it that much simpler when you go to dig. I ordered these from Amazon. They're fiberglass. Those that you get from Lowe's are like a hollow weird metal, and I find that they break really easily depending on how tough your soil is, and the fiberglass ones are really sturdy, so I like those to use for projects like this. Now this shrub is not one that you're going to likely be able to find. It is called a pucker up dogwood, and I had it at my last garden, and Proven Winners discontinued it about 2 years ago. And I called around and found a nursery in Columbus when I went to Cultivate this past week and stopped by before I stopped at Cultivate to pick it up. Now, right now it looks a little weird. The leaves are smaller than usual. The growth is kind of odd. It typically spreads out a little more. But the reason why is because this has probably been in a container for about 2 years. Whatever's out there left at garden centers are going to be the last ones available. So if you see it, I recommend picking it up. I'm not sure why it was discontinued. It may not have been a great seller, but it has really beautiful foliage, and that's why I love it. So we're gonna have two dogwoods right here next to each other, but they're very different dogwoods, and they'll both be deciduous. If I could have, I would have dug the one up from my last home and brought it with me. I love this shrub so much. So I was excited to be able to find it locally. You may be able to find it online. I looked and looked, and there's a couple places, but the prices were kind of crazy. So I just settled for locally, kind of. I had to travel, but I was able to pick it up. This is a species or a variety of dogwood 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲. 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 tends to get really tall, so this one stays a little shorter, which is nice. This is a new cherry, which is typically more red. It's been overhead watered. It's been sitting in with all these other shrubs for a couple months, so it doesn't look as great as it should, and will probably not getting as much sun as it would like. But this is what it typically looks like. It's a very dark, bright red, and it is a sand cherry called Stay Classy. So it gets 3 to 4 foot tall and wide as well, and will fill the space kind of nicely. So I'm playing off the colors of the foliage in a lot of these plantings, trying to pair things together that are much different, so they'll kind of intermingle a little bit, but you'll definitely be able to see the structure of the shrub because of its leaf color. This is a Kinsley Ghost honeysuckle, which is a really popular honeysuckle that as it develops and gets a little older, it produces really beautiful blue foliage and looks a bit like eucalyptus. So for those of us who can't grow eucalyptus perennially, this is a nice alternative. I will need to get a trellis for this. It can get 4 to 5 foot wide and up to 12 foot tall, and it is a vine, so I'll probably pick one out over winter. It's not going to do much for the rest of the season, so I can wrangle it in the spring next year and let it crawl up something I find. The styrax Starway to Heaven is going here. I've placed it far enough from the fence based on the sizing description that it will fill in nicely here. Now you may have noticed these plants are pretty evenly spaced out. I've spaced them so they shouldn't touch the fence, or if they touch the fence, they may gracefully touch the fence. But there's also enough room in front of these plants to intermingle smaller shrubs as I go on. So some of these that are initially planted are going to be a little taller and bigger, but there's always going to be areas to place like a tiny spirea or a tiny deutzia or something here in the front of the border. And if I find something I really love and this border becomes full, I can always just do a little kick out in the grass here and make part of this edge a little wider. This is one of my favorites. It's called Blue Shadow 𝗟𝗏𝗲𝗄. It is a beautiful powdery blue shrub. You can see this new foliage, how beautifully powdery blue it is. It is one of those shrubs that if you touch the leaves, it kind of wipes off the blue, so don't be doing so much of that. This one I've heard has also got issues with reverting from the rootstock. So it'll pop up green 𝗟𝗏𝗲𝗄 in its place, and you just cut that out or remove that as it shows up. And this one is another one that will get 4 to 5 feet tall and wide, 4 to 6 feet tall and wide. And I've kind of sandwiched the styrax in between blue and blue with the glossy green, so it'll pop out really nicely. This is a 9-bark. I'm not sure of the variety name. I think it might be Little Devil. It was one that was planted here that I dug up where the hydrangeas are planted behind the fence now. So really beautiful foliage. I have 2 of them. There's one here and then there's one down there. And I've just kind of spaced them out kind of evenly here along the back of the border because I have another 9-bark on that side over there. Here's a shrub I picked up from Great Garden Plants that I had in my last garden because I loved it so much. I've never seen it locally, but it's a really stunning barberry called Sunjoy Sequins. Now, some barberries are invasive. We don't have that issue here in Ohio, but I think like you can't purchase them in Indiana and some other states, I believe. So some of you may not be able to get this one, but if you can, like look at this foliage here, how beautifully pink and green and white that is. It might grow a little slower in my experience. The one at my last home grew pretty slow because of its variegation. So this is one that I will probably come in sooner and tuck something in, but it's also one that can get 4 to 5 foot tall and wide and can be pruned on and trimmed up as needed. We've got a camellia here, which I'm really excited about trying camellias as a southerner. So there's not a whole lot of good camellias that we can grow up here. A lot of them are marginally hardy. These are supposed to be hardy to zone 6. Camellias are evergreen typically and have beautiful glossy foliage, and this is one called Just Chill Red Tip. So you'll notice the new foliage here comes out red, and then it will bloom in fall or winter and produce some nice color back here when nothing else is obviously blooming that's deciduous. So this part of the bed is pretty empty, and it'll fill in over time as I find things I want to put in there locally. This is another one of the 9 barks, and this is another camellia called Double Mauve. So it also has interesting new foliage color. It's a little more orange, but it gets a little smaller than just chill red tip. I think it stays a little narrower. So hopefully these will be happy here, and I'm getting them in a little early. 3 more months to our last frost, so they'll be able to settle in nicely. They'll be on drip irrigation. There's drip irrigation under this bed. I'll just have to pop an emitter in there, and hopefully they'll settle in nicely before winter. There's a break here. I am moving this lilac, as I've mentioned in previous videos. Probably going to be moving it next to the camellia down here, simply so it'll be closer to the pool area, and maybe we'll get some fragrance off of it when it blooms in the backyard. This is a reblooming lilac, I believe. I think it bloomed last fall after we moved in, but there's also a bigger lilac over there in that bed in front of the barn that'll also provide some fragrance to the backyard in early spring. This is a new holly called Castle Rouge. It's another one that has new red growth. You can see a theme here. I love a different foliage, especially one that changes color. It just provides that much more interest. This one gets 4 to 8, yeah, 5 to 8 foot tall and 4 to 5 foot wide. Hardy in zones 5 through 7. So really nice one here, really tiny, but in my experience, look, you can see how much new growth this has put on just not having the best conditions over next to the shrub bay for the past couple months. We have a sparkler, Illuminati Sparks Mock Orange, which this one, when it came in, was stunning. It's lost a little bit of its variegation because it's not been getting as much sun, being crammed over there. So that's why I want to get these planted. But it's a beautiful mock orange. I have not been able to smell the scent off of it because it does bloom in spring. You can kind of see the leftovers here. But the variegation on these, I'll put a picture on the screen, is really stunning. So I'm excited to have another one of these back here. I do have one in the front garden bed this year that I'm excited about. And this is a rhododendron called Dandy Man Color Wheel. And it's a really beautiful rhododendron. Now we have a higher pH soil here, so I'm going to be, you may have noticed my bag of soil acidifier there. I'm going to be adding some of that in with the planting hole. Hardy from zones 5 to 9, 4 to 8 foot tall and wide, and it needs part sun to sun. But back here, it'll be protected. You can see this is the evening now, around 7 o'clock, and you can see how much shade is given. So this will get more sun throughout the daytime, but all of these shrubs will get a nice reprieve this time of day as they head into nightfall. And that is it for now. I had way more things over there than I thought I did. That's usually how that works. You gather more plants than you realize you've gathered, then you go through them and you're like, oh, this bed's almost full. So I need to find some interesting little evergreens. That's another thing that I can tuck here around this fence, is smaller little evergreens, mugo pines, tiny little arborvitae, that type thing in front of the deciduous stuff, just to give some color and some texture in winter. So after I get these things planted, I'm going to focus on the next several weeks, getting as much as I can planted that's left over that I have. That way they don't struggle anymore in their containers and they can start settling in for winter. And then I'll transition to finding some new plants, maybe. All right, so we're going to get to planting the styrax. This is a, as I mentioned, also called a snowbell. We're going to plant it first, and then I'm going to go through and plant all of these other things very quickly and then show you the result at the end. So as I mentioned, I like to use these stakes for planting. It's a really nice way to mark the location. Specifically, I did come out here with a tape measure and measure all these things off. I get pretty particular about those things sometimes, especially when you're planting plants that grow to a certain width. It's good to prepare for them in advance and not necessarily cram them together now, because I don't want to be removing them in a few years. And right here is my drip line. So this is perfect. I did run this bed. If you noticed a couple videos ago, or I did run this drip before I covered it up with wood chips. And so all I'll need to do is dig this hole and then come through and pop an emitter into this black tubing there, and then we'll be good to go. And I'll run the drip tonight, because some of these things have been sitting out since this morning in the sun and they didn't get watered today, and that way they will. I'm going to be amending these planting holes with Biotone, which is organic, and 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲. 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, the minerals themselves, this is not a claimed organic product, but it's really good for plants, and I found a whole lot of success with it, so I don't mind putting it in the ground in some of my planting holes, depending on what I'm planting. Now, here's something important when you're planting a tree. Growers, when they're potting up plants, sometimes, a lot of them are reputable and do a good job, some of them are not, so you usually want to knock the soil off of it and make sure you're exposing the root flare. So let me pull this out right here and show you what I'm talking about. So this is in a net. Let's see all those beautiful roots in there. So this is actually potted really well. You can see here at the bottom of this is what I'm talking about. See how the stem kind of starts to go out a little bit? You want that exposed and above the ground. So when this grows, it won't be covered up. There'll be no issues later with this tree when it starts to grow on. So let's throw some Biotone in here. This is a relatively short trunked tree, or short container. Put a little bit of 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 in here just to feed it for the rest of this season and get some nice root growth on it. And we'll space this how I think it should go in this hole. It is staked, and I'm going to leave that on here this fall because it is a thin trunk, and I want it to have as much support with some of these high winds that we get as you can. All right, I'm going to leave this uncovered, and let me go grab an emitter, and I'll pop this in and cover the mulch up. All right, so I got my emitters. I need to order some more. I don't think I'm going to have enough for every plant today, so I may have to go grab some of those tomorrow and finish this up. I tend to use on regular distribution tubing, like this is the black down here, just 2-gallon emitters on almost everything. If it's something that doesn't need a whole lot of water, I will do 1 gallon, but the reason I use 2-gallon is because it's consistent throughout. So if I want to cut down the water that everything's getting on the system, I just reduce the number of time that it's watering. So this zone typically runs 45 minutes a day right now. That's because I'm trying to get these hydrangeas settled in and everything else I planted this year. I'll probably continue 45 minutes, so that means these plants will get, you know, a gallon and a gallon and a half really over 45 minutes. I'll continue that probably this year, and then in spring I'll probably cut that down because they will have been settled in. I typically at the last home didn't really run my irrigation more than 30 minutes at a time, but on days where we've not had, or weeks where we've not had rain, I can adjust that as needed to give them a little more water. So these are really easy to pop in here with my punch gun I have, which if you don't have one of these and you do drip, it's really nice. Just dig down here and find the tubing and pull it up a little bit. Make sure we don't get dirt on anything. Pop that hole in there for me. There we go. So this is right next to the root ball. And cover this up a little bit. I'm not going to put soil over the emitter, but I am going to go ahead and cover the mulch up. So I'm going to bring mulch to the tree, not against the trunk necessarily, so we'll pull it back a little bit. But I do want to cover this back up so we're not having that awful crabgrass I'm getting everywhere in the garden when I dig in it. So I'm being really careful now that I've had issues with it when I'm digging in a bed, so we don't disturb any of those weed seeds. All right, and that's it. I'm going to go around and plant all of these other things really quickly and pop in the rest of the emitters I have. I might dig around because I thought I ordered some in spring, but they're not in my usual drawer. So I'll get that done and we'll take a look at it at the end. All right, y'all, I'm done. I'm pretty filthy. I have like 4 or 5 maybe plants that are not on emitters. I'm currently running the drip irrigation to test the emitters that I put in there. That's something you always want to do. I did end up adding a tiny piece of 1/4 inch drip on some of them that were further away from the 1/2 inch tubing, just to get the line near the root ball. As those plants age and the roots grow into the soil around it, that won't necessarily be a problem, and I can remove that if desired. But I'm really gross. It's taken about an hour and 15 minutes maybe since I cut the camera off last. I get questions sometimes like, why do we never see you dig anything? Why do we never see you do any of the work? And listen, I don't know if you live in an area that has 80 and 90% humidity and you're sweating at 75 degrees in the shade like I am right now. But if you did, you might not ask those questions. So I don't want to record myself looking like this on camera, but I do all this myself, so let's take a look. I am soaked right now. So let's turn the camera around and look at everything. So I've still got the containers here. One thing I'm going to focus on in this garden is doing nice plant labels for everything. This garden's going to be bigger than my last one. I'm pretty good at remembering plant names, but some of the plant names are really fancy, and over winter I tend to forget those and I have to remember them again in the spring. And it usually comes back to me pretty quickly, but I'm going to get nice labels. And I want to make sure I get all the names of these down before I remove the buckets, and then it'll be in this video, so if I need to go back and look at it, I can. All right, the containers are still laying here, the sticks are still laying here until tomorrow, and then anything that I didn't get a drip emitter to, the mulch has not been brought up to the plant yet. So we have the Sergeant Pepper dogwood down here at the bottom with the variegated foliage, the Pucker Up dogwood here. This is the Stay Classy Cherry. I think it'll be really beautiful in maybe another month when it starts pushing new growth. Like I said, it's got some calcium and stuff on the leaves because we have hard water, so they're not as bright red as it typically would be. Kinsley Ghost Honeysuckle. I think this tree is going to be beautiful here. Very upright structure, provide a little privacy to the pool, and just uprightness in this area. That'll be really nice. Blue Shadow 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 here. I think this is the Little Devil 9-bark. Not sure, no name 9-bark. Sunjoy Sequence Barberry. Red Tip Camellia. And then, still got a shovel here. Other no name 9-bark that's the same as the other one, I believe. This is the Double Mauve Camellia. Castle Rouge Holly. So there's a whole Castle series. I think I've got both of the other. There may be another one, but there's Castle Wall, and then there's Castle I don't remember the other one, but one's male, one's female, and they pollinate each other. And then the Illuminati Sparks Mock Orange, Dandy Man Rhododendron. This is a Brandywine Viburnum that has beautiful like purple and red berries. Fluffy Arborvitae. This is a Ginger Wine 9-bark, and this is Castle Wall. So this is the male variety, does not produce berries. All right, you can't really tell from the camera, but it's getting really dark right now, so I'm gonna call it an evening and get washed up. And then I'm gonna see about ordering some more drip emitters, or whether I need to go pick those up locally, depending on when they'll arrive. And get out here tomorrow and get a few more things planted. So the rest of the weekend, I think I'm going to start laying out some hydrangeas. It's probably, I honestly probably need to wait another week or so on that bed, but I'd like to start putting some of these dowels in the ground and marking them off, the plant stakes, where they're gonna go, because there'll be some measuring, because where I wanna place those, I want them so they'll be able to grow to kind of their full potential. And then I'll intermingle hostas and other shade plants in those beds. But because they're getting like they're still in their containers and some of them really need to be planted. I want to get that done as soon as possible, and I need to determine whether I need to make another bed around another tree to do that. So thank y'all for following along this evening. I hope you enjoyed this video of me planting all of this shrub border. Still a few things to find here and there, and I'll be picking up interesting small items over the coming years to place in the front of the border or here and there as things grow in. I can get a better idea of how much space it's going to take up. Thanks for joining me this evening, and remember, be a light. Take care. Bye.